All right. Here we going on in the third hour today. 45 on the controls, back halftime, and joined. Always thankful when Connor O'Hara spends a little time with us Saturday down south. Talk a little college football, and man, there's a lot going on, Connor, in college football. Man, how was your weekend? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be here, man. It's kind of crazy that we already have the playoff upon us, which is just bizarre to consider the lack of time we've had in between these conference championship games and the college football playoff. But having the Heisman in the book as well, it feels like the college football calendar is more spread out than it's ever been, but also more condensed. And that sounds strange to say, but it's a fun week to be talking about all things college football playoff.
It's like a controlled chaos in a sense. That you just gotta rein it in. And then another thing I want to get your thoughts on: is it a home run for North Carolina and Bill Belichick? How do you see that going?
One of the weirdest coaching moves I can ever remember. Maybe the single weirdest. I'm just blown away that this actually happened. It's the type of thing that you would see in a headline in The Onion, but not actually play out in real life. It's so strange to me to consider that, like, take the Belichick part out of this for a second. North Carolina, in what it's been the last few years, has been led by a guy in Mac Brown that's one of the most accomplished coaches in the history of our sport, right? But at the same time, the growing sentiment was, well, North Carolina is going to go in a different direction. They need to get younger. They can't have the 72-year-old coach anymore. And then what do? They hired someone that's 8 months younger than him. I mean, that's just crazy to consider that North Carolina was even in that position and that Belichick could be on the table. But clearly he feels like he has more to give to the game of football. And being in college for the first time in his illustrious career was the move he felt like he needed to make. I'm extremely skeptical because the talent acquisition element is, a little bit more troubling than one would think, because he had a lot of struggles as a GM in the NFL and really struggled the last decade with the players that he was bringing into New England. And I wonder how that's going to translate at North Carolina. But yeah, it's fascinating. There's no doubt that UNC won the press conference.
Connor, I'm looking at this playoff 12, and it's kind of been a hot topic, I guess. I mean, it's the first edition of it, and I think I trying to find something to compare it to, and you think of NFL getting to the playoffs, and you think about the quarterback and the coach matchup so much. You think about, well, where is our talent? Are we a defensive team? Are we an offensive team? Who are the best coaches, Connor? Like, who are the two, if you were to say, man, these are the two best coaches left in the playoffs? Well, there's a lot of them, but who do you like as far as, man, because I know a lot of people are fading Jimmy Franklin. They think that SMU team is going to go up there and have a chance. Jimmy Franklin doesn't really win a lot of big-time games. But who are your top two coaches that are left in the college football playoff?
I think you can make a real case for Dan Lanning. I think Dan Lanning has some things to be able to overcome in some of these big-time games as well before we put him into that group. And he, by winning the Big Ten championship and beating that Penn State team that was really fighting in that game, and also the Ohio State winning the regular season, of course, I'm not going to discount the possibility that Dan Lanning is in that top two conversation. But right now, give me the two coaches that coached in the SEC championship. I would take Sark and Kirby over anybody in college football, and I mean that. I think the ability that Sark has to scheme is so unmatched. And if you watch Quinn Ewers, you'll see a quarterback that is far from perfect. You see some of these passes that he throws, and you're like, how are they going to work around that? How are they going to work around the fact that I don't think he's been quite right all year dealing with the rib oblique injury that sidelined him in late September. And you still find ways, and that's what a great schemer does. And I see Steve Sarkisian do that time and time again. And there's a reason why they haven't lost to a team outside of the top 15 of the AP poll to TCU at the end of 2022, a TCU team that went on to play in a national championship. And Kirby, what Kirby's built at Georgia is the closest thing to Saban's Alabama that we've seen. And TBD, if they can win their third national championship in a 4-year stretch and do so likely with a backup quarterback. But, yeah, to me, I'm just not betting against Kirby Smart. And as long as Alabama's not on the other sideline, it just seems like a foolish endeavor to assume that his team, even with all the ups and downs they've had this year, is ever out of it. I think it's telling that they're sitting there with a first-round bye.
Man, I'm with you there. That Kirby Smart getting a bye. I look at that bottom side of the bracket, and I got Georgia. I penciled them in for the national championship game. I actually got Tennessee over Ohio State. I think that Clemson Texas game is going to be a little bit tougher than what people think. I don't trust Clemson down the stretch, but I like their front seven. I could see that being a low scoring game. You get a turnover, something happens. You never know. Who do you got penciled in right now? If you were to say, hey, here's the Final Four, here's the national championship, who you got?
Yeah, I think that Final Four is going to be really interesting because I have Ohio State beating Oregon in a rematch to be able to get there, and obviously Ohio State would have to beat Tennessee as well. But I have an Ohio State-Texas semifinal, and I think that'd be awesome. I mean, I think that getting to see that play out with a Texas team that's been so unbelievably good on defense, I think that would be, it would feel very much like a matchup that we were kind of, prepping for in the preseason when we were talking about the talent that is on these two teams, and the ramifications of that would be monumental, of course, for Ryan Day. And then on the other side of it, you can make a real argument that if Georgia gets matched up with Notre Dame, that's kind of scary, and that's kind of scary for the Dogs. I'm still going to go with Georgia. I'm still going to trust in Kirby Smart, but I have Boise State getting to that semifinal. And I think Ashton Genty, who is the Heisman runner-up, a guy that could have won the Heisman in a lot of different years, I think that he's going to be a fascinating test for Penn State in that second-round game, because the thing I keep coming back to with Penn State, you talk about Jimmy Franklin, the struggles in big games, 319 in his career against AP top 10 teams, or career at Penn State, I should say. That's a guy that has struggled in those moments. And what does it look like, season on the line, a game that could be played really, really tight against a Boise State defense that can actually get after the quarterback pretty well? And would Penn State struggle to contain that and struggle to contain Ashton Genty? I think that could very much play out. So, yeah, I would have Georgia beating Boise State, and then I would have Texas beating Ohio State to give us a rematch, not a rematch, but a part 3 of Texas and Georgia in the national championship.
Oh, I like that. That would be, I think we'd all sign up for that right now. I wonder that, and this is a thing I've been talking a little bit about with Oregon, and maybe I haven't seen enough of them, because I feel like if it's going to be a 45 type of game where it's the first one to 45, I like Oregon against everybody. What about when Oregon gets stopped 3 times in a row? Is their defense good enough to get stops back-to-back series and not let it get away from them? How is their athletic ability? Are they really a true number 1 seed?
I think they are. And I think that the way that they won that game at Wisconsin would give you a little bit more confidence in that setting. And Dylan Gabriel, some of the throws that he made down the stretch, just unbelievably clutch. That was the knock on him coming into the year, was that he wasn't really clutch in those big-time moments, and that he kind of was a little bit more stat patter than generational quarterback. And he's going to be all over these FBS record books by the time he plays his last down at Oregon this year. But the question about the defense, I think that defense is still really good. Now, they have some areas where they could struggle, and they're not exactly elite against the run in the ways that you would assume that they would be. Ashton Genty took it for 192 earlier in the year, and that was kind of the question coming in. But they do have DJ Uiagalelei's younger brother. He was monumental in that game against Wisconsin as well. Hey, he's one of the leaders on that defensive line, and this is an Oregon team that, look, is standing there as the last unbeaten in FBS. And for a reason. I mean, they are battle-tested. To have 3 wins over teams that are in the college football playoff, I don't think they're here by accident, but I think getting a rematch against Ohio State, a very motivated Ohio State team, I think that could be their undoing, and maybe Oregon doesn't even end up winning a playoff game.
Connor, I agree with you there. Colton Little here. Good to hear from you always, and having you on here on Mondays with Matt and Phil. If we can step outside of the white lines here for a second and into the boardroom, which is where most of the big stories in college football are actually happening, I guess it seems like on Twitter, if you look there and pay attention. I think that you've seen recently that we've seen a string of coaches, Mike Norvell, Brian Kelly, Gundy, several other these big-name coaches either willingly take pay cuts or kind of be finagled into taking pay cuts that have had that money reworked into the NIL for their roster. So do you think this is more administrations hitting coaches where it hurts in their wallets, or are these coaches kind of falling on the sword themselves to, save a little face and maybe buy a little time because their big, gaudy contracts, after all, are why we're in this position of playing players in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the latter. And I think there are a lot of people that saw what happened with Jim Harbaugh. There are a lot of people that thought Jim Harbaugh, after the disastrous 2020 that Michigan had, they thought he'd be gone. And instead, he kind of goes back and says, all right, let's renegotiate this contract, not necessarily for NIL purposes, but restructures the deal entirely and says, all right, I'll prove it to you. You know, like, I don't need the money. A lot of these coaches, they don't really need the money. They'd rather have better teams. They have legacies that would, you know, ideally like to be defined in this era of the sport. And I think you're seeing, you know, coaches that are willing to take that chance and know, all right, even if this doesn't work out, I'm still going to end up getting buyout money, and I'm still going to be taken care of. But I'd like to keep my job, and I'd like to show my bosses that I still know how to do this. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a rare instance in the 21st century of coaches realizing, like, all right, maybe I don't have all the power in the world, and maybe I do need some help to be able to make this happen. I'd rather have a job than not. Let's go and find a way to make this work. And who knows, maybe we're going to be talking about the next Jim Harbaugh in a year or two.
Connor, I saw where Drew Holler from Penn State's going to come back, and something I've been in favor with the NIL is it favors these quarterbacks. Why wouldn't you? Dylan Gabriel, not really going to play on Sundays, but hey, he's an All-American college quarterback. Drew Aller, I don't know. Maybe he has the height that, you know, maybe he's going to have the measurements eventually. He's a talented kid. Do you think Quinn Ewers comes back for another year? Does Manning enter the – I mean, when you're looking at some of these teams here that are going on, do you think Quinn Ewers does come back? Is there still some quarterbacks that could jump into the portal?
There could be. I think Ewers and Jalen Milroe will both leave for the NFL. If I had to guess, I think that they will decide ultimately there is enough of an NFL market. Though it is worth mentioning, there's more – There's a little bit more risk mitigation than there's been in years past, of course, with NIL and teams recognizing that you can tell a guy, look, come back, we'll take care of you, you'll get the Carson Beck treatment. Now, Carson Beck has kind of become a little bit of a cautionary tale where you wonder, where would he have gone last year compared to this year? What is the NFL market saying about him now? Carson Beck, another guy that people forget, has a year of eligibility left. He's got the elbow injury. What happens with all that? But the Drew Aller situation is kind of surprising because he's risen up a lot of NFL draft boards and is a guy that could have emerged as one of the favorites in what we think is a thin quarterback draft class. And he makes the decision to come back and does so before the playoff even starts. So he's not necessarily dependent on that success to be able to make that decision for him. And maybe that just allows him to loosen up and know, all right, I'm going to be taken care of. No matter what happens in this playoff, I can just go out there, play my game, and not worry about the dollar account that it's going to, you know, make an impact on, knowing that I'm going to be able to just go out there, do what I do best, and, you know, let all that, the rest of that stuff take care of itself.
Well, Connor, man, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. We always appreciate you giving some of your time as you do, and I don't know if we'll go a Monday, then we'll have you on that next Monday, so there'll be a lot more shaken up in the college football landscape, and it's always a joy to get your perspective and to talk with you.
Gentlemen, really appreciate it. Happy holidays to you as well.
BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here.